Well, Ron Paul is kicking ass. In Iowa, he's up to #1. Latest polls have him at 23%, Romney at 20%, Gingrich all the way down to 14%. So what is happening? Well, the establishment is losing it. They can't stand this phenomenon. Now, I'm going to give you one of Ron Paul's ads here for two reasons. One is to show you that I'm not necessarily a Ron Paul supporter at all. I agree with him on half the stuff. We've talked about it, civil liberties, defense, etc. What you're going to see is both why Ron Paul is beginning to win in Iowa and why I can't fully support him. So let's watch this ad first.
What's up with these sorry politicians? Lots of bark. When it's showtime, whimpering like little shih tzus. You want big cuts? Ron Paul's been screaming it for years. Budget crisis? No problem. Cut $1 trillion year one. That's trillion with a T. Department of Education? Gone. Interior, Energy, HUD, Commerce? Gone. Later, bureaucrats. That's how Ron Paul rolls. Want to drain the swamp? Ron Paul. Do it.
I'm Ron Paul, and I approve this message.
I don't want to blow up the Department of Education. I don't want to go, pfft, right? So I want you to understand that this is not a segment we're doing because I love Ron Paul or I'm a big supporter of Ron Paul. But you got to call things as they are. And when you look at how the establishment is treating him, especially among Republicans and on Fox News, it's an absolute injustice. Let's start with Bill O'Reilly. He was on the Today Show. This is what he says about Ron Paul.
Ron Paul. His foreign policy disqualifies him in my eyes as an American, not as a journalist. But, you know, I don't think we need another Neville Chamberlain with Iran. And, you know, so he wants to be friends with Iran as well.
#1 in Iowa, #2 in New Hampshire. It doesn't matter. Fox News is going to disqualify him. Why? Because O'Reilly thinks his policy on Iran is terrible. Really? But while he was interviewing Mitt Romney, here's what Bill O'Reilly had to say about Iran and the idea of attacking it. Watch.
You're a tough guy. You're going to stare them down and say, look, I'm going to use them? Because if you bomb Iran, that starts World War III. You know that. I mean, they're going to try to block Hormuz. Oil will double. The unintended consequences all against the United States all over the Muslim world will be horrible. That's what Iran is banking on.
So you know what? It turns out Bill O'Reilly actually doesn't want to attack Iran. He doesn't disqualify Ron Paul based on that. He agrees with Ron Paul, actually, on that issue. The thing is, Fox News and the rest of the conservative establishment and the Republicans, they're desperate to disqualify Ron Paul for any reason. By the way, what's the real reason? It's because he might end the corruption in Washington. And those guys feed off and live on that corruption. Now, when you go inside the state of Iowa, Politico had an interesting article. In fact, the headline is Paul Panic Seizes Iowa Establishment. And that is very accurate. Look at this quote from Becky Beach. She's an Iowa Republican who worked for both Bushes. It would make the caucuses mostly irrelevant, if not entirely irrelevant, if Ron Paul wins. It would have a very damaging effect because I don't think he could be elected president. So, and both Iowa and national Republicans wouldn't think he represents the will of the voters. Two unbelievable things there. First, when Ron Paul was in second or third place, they said, oh, it's irrelevant. He's in second or third. Now that he's winning, they're like, well, if he wins, then the whole caucus becomes irrelevant. But not only that, she says that he would not reflect the will of the Iowa voters. But if he won, he just won the vote. They would have just voted in Iowa. They would have selected Ron Paul. But ahead of time, the Republican establishment is saying, well, if the voters vote that way, they must not have meant it. It's mental. It makes no sense. But they keep on continuing. The Iowa House Speaker, Craig Polson, says, I don't think any candidate perverting the process in that fashion helps the caucuses in any way. You know what he's referring to? The fact that he's got a lot of people on the ground who support him and hence will go vote for him. But that's the whole point of the caucus. When Obama did that in Iowa, everybody went nuts like, oh my God, look at all this enthusiasm on the ground that he has. It wasn't perverting the process back then. And look, I supported Obama. So again, I'm not on Paul's side here in terms of politics. But when you look at it, it's outrageous to say that if he does what every other candidate has done in Iowa, it would pervert the process. They can't stand this guy. Now we go to one other guy, a pretty important guy in Iowa, the governor, Terry Branstad, of course, another Republican. He says, people are going to look at who comes in second and who comes in third. If Romney comes in a strong second, it definitely helps him going into New Hampshire and the other states. So wait a minute, let me get this right. When Ron Paul was in second or third, it was irrelevant being in second or third. When Ron Paul is winning, well, then who wins is irrelevant, and you got to look at who came in second or third? Third? What are we talking about, third? This is the dumbest thing I have ever seen in my life because they're scared to death of Ron Paul.